Connected to the cloud server. Recording. Okay. Okay, everyone. Well, so now we come to the sixth and the final lesson in this course on Jewish meditation. And at the outset of the course, we mentioned that in many people's minds, meditation doesn't appear to be a central part of Judaism. In fact, we asked the question, is it a Jewish practice at all? And there is, by the way, no explicit mention of meditation in the Torah. And it isn't part of the regular practice of Judaism either that we're familiar with. But what we have seen in the last five lessons is that it is, number one, definitely a Jewish practice. And that, number two, it has a very significant role in developing Jewish faith and spirituality and spiritual consciousness. But the question still remains that we haven't yet answered. How central is it to Judaism? And if you have a very quick glance at our exercise 6.1 on page 182, where we say on a scale of 1 to 5, estimate the centrality of each of the following to Judaism: action, values, faith, and mindfulness. And I'm pretty certain, without spending a lot of time doing this exercise, that the results are probably likely to show that mindfulness doesn't get a very high rating, and that probably action is most likely going to get the highest rating. And as we all know, Judaism is very heavily weighted towards action. And even the values that Judaism advances are mostly action-orientated. And we see this in the little Mishnah, which is just a one-liner. It's your text number 1 on page 183, in which the Mishnah says, the essential thing is not study, but deed. So Judaism just keeps banging on all the time about deed. And it seems that meditation, therefore, gets squeezed out of the picture completely. Because Judaism essentially instructs us to live our lives through the mitzvot, which are defined behaviors, they're rituals. As we all know, the Torah contains 613 commandments, and they dictate pretty much every area of our life. You can't walk more than 4 paces without bumping into another mitzvah somewhere along the line. We're very familiar with lots of them. There's Shabbat, and there's Kashrut, and there's fasting Yom Kippur, there's charity. But as it happens, there are very, very many mitzvot with which we're not familiar. And the reason is because they're practices which we can't observe in the post-temple era. So the reason for the emphasis on action in Judaism is because at the end of the day, a hungry person is not very impressed with your meditations. To satisfy a hungry person's hunger, you can't stand there and think. You've got to give them food. And that's what Judaism is interested in. So meditation may have value, but if living a Jewish life is primarily about the way we act, it would seem, therefore, that everything that we've been talking about in the last 5 sessions, all of those meaningful insights, are marginal overall to Jewish life, which is a big problem, because we should have said that right at the very beginning. Then we wouldn't have had to bother with all of this business. Okay? But what we're going to learn in this lesson is that even the active practices of mitzvot are actually part of the Jewish meditative experience. And we're going to see that meditation is not only a central part of Judaism, but actually it is the foundation of everything. That's our finale for tonight. So let's just recapitulate for a moment. So in the very first lesson, we learned that the key to Jewish meditation is the ability of the mind to direct the heart. Remember that exercise about thinking and feeling, etc. And that then led us in the next 3 sessions to explore a number of meditations, which were primarily on the nature of the spiritual energy that underpins the physical universe and how we think about spirit and material. and invert them and understand that spirit is the essence, that it's the driver of everything. And the objective of all of those meditations was to move our hearts in terms of feeling the presence of God in our lives and sensing his presence in the world. And the form of meditation that we drew on in those sessions was, as we explained right at the very outset, hitbonanut, the thinking meditation, contemplative, contemplating with your mind, using our minds and using our intellects to grasp a different perspective of reality. And then last week, when we turned to discussing ordinary daily mundane activities such as eating and sleeping and working and turning them into sacred moments, we used a different meditative technique. We used a kavanah meditation, the intent and mindfulness on the action and what you're doing in this action, the intention that you have in doing the action, the way in which you perform it. And in that way, you turn the ordinary action, the mundane action, into something which is sacred and something which is special and something which is meaningful. And without kavanah, we said, the action remains kind of like earthbound. It remains just ordinary and mundane. But what kavanah does is to lift the action up, to elevate it, not just to make it meaningful for the person, but as we learned, it has the ability to kind of connect with the inner spirituality of the deed and to take the hidden sparks of godliness that are in it and to elevate those sparks up and to transform them, to transmute them take the godly sparks in it and return them to their sort of divine source in the universe. So the difference between hitbonanut meditation and kavanah meditation is that hitbonanut meditation shows how the mind can be harnessed for meditative purposes. And kavanah meditation shows how the way we act can also be utilized for meditative purposes. And that's an important distinction between hitbonanut and kavanah. So if hitbonanut meditation focuses on how the mind engages with godliness, kavanah meditation focuses on how the bodily actions triggers meditation. Or to put it differently, how our bodily actions can also be a source of meditation. And at the end of the day, you have to ask this question: does it matter how we connect with God? If the whole point of meditation is the outcome, the desired result, which of course is to develop a deep sense of connectedness and awareness of God, or a more deeply developed attitude and refined emotions, then does it really matter how we get there, one way or the other? And if just as the mind can be harnessed for meditative purposes, the body and the way we act can also be utilized to the same purpose. So this central concept is actually what holds the key to why Judaism is so action-orientated, as we're going to explain as we move forward in tonight's session. So let's therefore examine those actions that we call mitzvot, the ones that we perform with our bodies, and try and unpack them and understand what is going on and how they can serve as triggers for meditation, harnessing our sense of connectedness to God. So we can start with a very seemingly simple question. What is the relationship between an act and its intention? In other words, is just going through the motions of performing a mitzvah enough? So look at the case that's put forward in the question on page 194, which I'm going to read to you as follows. Of course, everyone knows that it is a mitzvah for a Jew to hear the shofar sounded on Rosh Hashanah. But a particular Jewish couple are unaware of this obligation, and on Rosh Hashanah they simply go out for a stroll. And they happen to pass a synagogue. And by a stroke of providence, the shofar is sounded just at that moment. And the couple hear the shofar while walking in the street. They had no intention of going to shul. They didn't even know that the shofar had to be blown, but they heard it. And now the question is, have they fulfilled the mitzvah of hearing the shofar? Nice question, isn't it? So this question, and many others like it, is widely debated in the Talmud. And some authorities argue that the function of a mitzvah is nothing more than the practical behavior, just the act. Intent is great, but it's a bonus. And others argue that the mitzvot have to be performed purposefully. Intent is crucial. And we have to turn to the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, for the final decision, which we read in text number 2 on page 185. Once again, I shall read these for the sake of those who might not have the books in front of them. This is taken from the Shulchan Aruch. To fulfill a mitzvah obligation, we must actively intend to observe the mitzvah. And therefore, if we observe a mitzvah unwittingly, or for a purpose other than to perform a mitzvah, we have not fulfilled the mitzvah. Some Torah authorities disagree, and they opine that mitzvot do not require intent, and they are fulfilled even when performed unwittingly. However, the final law sides with the former opinion. So, the accepted opinion is that without intent, the act of a mitzvah is a meaningless one. And the purpose of a mitzvah is therefore something more than just getting something done. The mindful awareness that you invest into the act is going to generate its meaning and is going to shape it into a mitzvah, without which it's not a mitzvah. Fascinating. The fact that a mitzvah needs intent therefore shows us that the goal of a mitzvah is more than just behavioral, just an act. Let me give these examples. Supposing a person sets a rule for their child for their safety. For example, you have to do this, you have to do that. The parent doesn't care whether the child is obeying the rules with the intent of respecting the parent or not. They just care that the child obeys the rule and acts safely, right? The fact that the child acts in accordance with the rules is the only thing which counts. What the child is thinking when they obey the rule is completely irrelevant. Only the behavior counts, not the intention. Or consider this kind of bizarre example. Imagine that you are pulled over by a policeman for driving at 50 miles per hour in a 50 mile per hour speed zone. And when you're pulled up and you roll down your window, the policeman walks over to you and says, "Excuse me, madam, excuse me, sir, were you driving at 50 miles per hour with the intent to obey the law, or just because it happens to be the speed of the traffic in this particular place and you couldn't go any faster?" And you'd look at him in amazement. What the heck is the difference? I'm driving at 50 miles an hour. My intent is not relevant. It's just my behavior. I'm doing the right thing. It's the behavior that counts, not the intention. So if mitzvot were only practical behavior instructions, then intent wouldn't matter. But what we've seen from the Shulchan Aruch is that intent does matter. And therefore there must be something about a mitzvah that serves a purpose that goes beyond the action. Okay? That's the logic of it. Something that achieves you to require intention and awareness. And we have to try and find out what it is. Now, with very few notable exceptions, the reasons for mitzvot are not given in the Torah. And in Jewish literature, there are lots of multiple approaches to try and explain the purpose of mitzvot. And altogether, they kind of paint a very multi-layered approach to our understanding of mitzvot. But in this lesson tonight, in this session, we're going to look at a number of these approaches, and we're going to see how they can shed light on the meditative element of Jewish ritual. Okay? That's our program for tonight. So in the first instance, we're going to look at a dimension of kavanah that applies to every mitzvah, irrespective of its specific performance or of its characteristics. If you were asked to translate the word mitzvah to someone, you'd probably say something like, it's a good deed. In Hebrew, the word mitzvah is from the Hebrew word tzivul, which means a commandment. But the word also has a very important Aramaic meaning. It is connected to the Aramaic word tzavta. And tzavta means to attach or to join. A mitzvah, in essence, joins a person who is performing the activity with the one who commanded or requested the activity. That is the essence of a mitzvah. Text number 3 on page 186. The word mitzvah means a connection, as in the Aramaic term tzavta, to attach or to join. One who performs a mitzvah bonds with God's very self, for God is the issuer of that commandment. And this is the significance of our sage's statement that the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. In other words, the mitzvah is the connecting with God, the commander. The bonding of the mortal who performs the commandment with the infinite God who issued the commandment is itself the greatest reward. So the fulfillment of a commandment connects the commander and the commanded. The way in which infinite God chose to connect with finite man was via his mitzvot, the commander and the commanded. Just think about human relationships. Human relationships are built on acts that parties do for each other. It isn't enough that you love a person internally. If you really love a person, you want to express your love to them. And how do you do that? You fulfill their wishes. When they ask you to do something, you want to do it because you love them. We do what people want because we love them, and that connects us to them and creates a bond between them asking us and us doing. And that's the essence of the divine relationship in a mitzvah. And this is even more pronounced in regard to our relationship with God, because if you think about it, there's no real way for us, a tiny, tiny little speck of a human being, one little creature amongst billions on the planet, infinitesimally small in the entire universe. What do we account for? We're not even a speck. And the huge, transcendent, beyond divine somewhere outside in the whole of the universe. Where can there ever be a connection between us? What value can we have? What significance can we have in the Creator's eyes? And the answer is when there's a connection made between us and we do what he asks us. And then we become significant. And then we become important. And that's the only way we can have that relationship with. It's on his terms. So the request for a mitzvah, and it doesn't matter what kind of mitzvah, whether it's large or small or easy or hard, just fulfilling a command, a request, offers us the opportunity to connect with God. So then a mitzvah is not merely a good deed or even the way to do what God wants. It's an opportunity to connect with the infinite creator of the universe. So in this sense, the specific act of the mitzvah itself, from this dimension, from this perspective, doesn't have any meaning. The intent within the mitzvah, the fact that you're connecting with God through it, is what makes the mitzvah meaningful. Think of it like a body and a soul. The physical act of the mitzvah is the body. The kavanah, the intention, is the soul. And without a soul, we know that a body is lifeless. So the act becomes lifeless unless it is invested with a sense that I'm connecting with God. So this is a spiritual meditation that happens at the time that one performs a mitzvah, whatever mitzvah, every mitzvah. This meditation changes the act from a simple act of service into an opportunity to transcend our limited selves and to be elevated in our relationship with transcendent God. Let's take a human example to flesh this out and to make it more real for us. Let us say in this example that a man buys roses for his wife or some flowers for his wife as a gift. After all, we all know that the best way to do it is to say it with flowers. And supposing he gave the flowers without intending to. He passed them across to his wife without paying any attention, just put it in her hand while he was busy doing something else. So the gift of the flowers is absolutely meaningless. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. The flowers themselves are not very valuable. She might not even have any use for them, actually. But the act is not what contributes to the relationship. And by the way, the inverse is not much better. The act, if he loves his wife, but he doesn't do anything to express his love, that's also not going to help to build the relationship. What is happening when he gives her the roses is he gives it to her with the intention of expressing his love and his care for her. And the bouquet that he gives her is much, much more than just a bunch of flowers. The bunch of flowers has turned into something special. It's become valued, not because of what it is, because what it is a couple of pounds, or a bit more if you buy them in Marks and Spencer's. But it is an intimate expression of love, expressed via the flowers. And it is the intent that has made that gift meaningful. I've only chosen, because you guys don't like all the slides and chopping and changing and stuff, so I've chosen just one or two slides now, but there's a nice one over here which shows this illustration quite well. Let me share screen, sorry. Says it all, doesn't it? Let me just find my way back over here. Pardon? Stop the share. Just let me stop the share. Can't find my, lost my cursor. My cursor has gone. Oh, I don't want to leave the meeting. No. Heavens, no, don't leave the meeting. Cancel. Don't know how to get out of this. Sorry, guys, I just can't find my cursor on the screen to leave us here to stop share. It is okay. Here we are. Okay. All right. So mitzvot operate in exactly the same way. The act alone just may not be powerful, it might not be particularly meaningful in itself. But when it is fueled with the awareness of a desire to connect, then it works. Then there's love. Then there's connection, just like with the flowers. In the example of gifting your flowers, the more the couple both appreciate each other and the more they feel for each other, the deeper the impression that the flowers will make. And mitzvot are the same. The more that you appreciate the infinite transcendence of God, and the more we are aware of the significant opportunity that is being embedded in this mitzvah and this opportunity, the more the mitzvah serves then to create that bond. So as we saw with eating and with sleeping and with working, it is the kavanah of the moment that makes all the difference. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons why the rabbis instituted a blessing before so many mitzvot. It's to make us stop, to give us the chance to give the mitzvah a meditative intent. That's its purpose. Before you go ahead and do the mitzvah, the blessing forces you to stop for a moment and to reflect on what you're about to do. It's kind of like a micro meditation in this moment on the transcendence of God. That's what's happening in this mitzvah. And how the mitzvah you're about to perform is an opportunity to deepen your relationship with him. Text number 4 on page 187. This is the inner significance of the blessing recited prior to performing a mitzvah. Blessed are you who sanctified us, kiddishanu, with his mitzvot. In Hebrew, the word kiddush means both sanctification and betrothal. And therefore, in performing a mitzvah, we are bound to God like a man betrothing his wife for the sake of being intimately united with each other. As the Torah states regarding the bonding of the first human couple, he shall cleave to his wife and they shall become one flesh. And when we study the Torah or perform a commandment, we achieve a similar, indeed an infinitely deeper and truer unity between our soul, along with all of its elements, and God's absolutely infinite light. Once again, we're always very careful in these to source the ideas that we're presenting over here and to show you that they are authentic. So now, seen through this perspective, mitzvot, every mitzvah, is a meditative practice. The act alone is just the opportunity or the trigger to establish and to experience a connection with God. And once again, the intention that we invest in the mitzvah, developed through meditation and awareness of our relationship with God, is what actually establishes the relationship and what leads the mitzvah to have its value. And that brings us back to our very first and only video tonight, meditation together with, of course, once again, Rabbi Label Wolf. Oh, sorry, got to share screen. Whoops. Hang on a second, I'll just get to this over here in a moment.
Pleasant thoughts can instill joy. Your imagination can conjure up many beautiful things, and yet it can't match reality. The actual experience in real time, in real life, surpasses imagination. Gently close your eyes and become aware of how powerful your imagination is. Conjure up a picture of yourself flying through the air with ease, comfortably, like a bird. The imagination allows you places and experiences that are beyond the laws of nature, because imagination comes from a very profound spiritual source. Bring to mind someone you love profoundly, a child, a spouse, a good friend, whichever. Become aware of their absence. They are away from you, perhaps on a holiday, perhaps living in another city. In your mind, give them a hug, embrace them. How does that feel? Doesn't it feel wonderful? And yet, if you were to meet them personally, one-on-one, and embrace them in reality, would not that be even much more powerful? That's why when people are absent and our connectedness is breached, we yearn and want their presence. And when they are with us, we can create that presence, the wonderfulness of being truly one. Imagine the thought of doing a mitzvah, saying a nice word to someone who needs encouragement. And yet, all the good intentions don't measure up to actually saying it in real time, in real life. When we do a mitzvah in real time and real life, we embrace Hashem. We touch what we call atzmos, the very essence of godliness. Make a personal commitment after this session to experience an embrace of God through doing a very real mitzvah.
Okay, so mitzvot are enhanced by meditation. Now we're going to take this idea a step further. Mitzvot not only require meditation, mitzvot are themselves meditations. I'll explain. Beyond the overall purpose of mitzvot as ways of developing a connection with the infinite God, the specific mitzvot also have an impact on the person who's performing them. God chose to command the mitzvot that he laid out for us because each specific mitzvah has a virtue and is designed to be a tool for our spiritual development. And although we may not know the specific reason for a mitzvah, performing the mitzvah is intended to inculcate in us, through meditation, a specific, very specific moral and spiritual value that it attaches to every mitzvah in its own unique way. And the following two texts from Nachmanides and then from Maimonides is going to highlight this idea. It's text number 5 on page 189, followed by text number 6 on page 190. First, Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. Our sages state, the mitzvot were given only to refine the person. The purpose of the mitzvot is not to benefit God, but rather to benefit humankind, to keep them safe from harm, to shield them from negative beliefs and base character traits, to remind them of the miracles and the wonders of the Creator, and to help them to know God. The Midrash employs the term titzaref for refining, which is usually refers to the refining of silver. And this informs us that the mitzvot refine mortals in a similar way to the way a silversmith refines silver. Silver refinement is a purposeful task done for the sake of removing all of the impurities. And similarly, the mitzvot are designed to remove every harmful belief from our hearts, to inform us of the truth, and to enable us to be constantly mindful of the truth. And Maimonides in the Guide to the Perplexed. Each of the 613 commandments exists either to communicate a correct view or to dismiss an unhealthy view, to communicate a rule of justice or to ward off an injustice, to endow people with a noble moral quality or to warn them against a negative moral quality. So although mitzvot are the way in which we serve God, they're actually designed for our benefit. God gifted us the mitzvot to help us to live better lives. And he wanted us to form certain kinds of values and character traits. He gave us mitzvot as the actions which would guide and develop those character traits in line with God's vision for humanity, for us, for human beings. In what way do the mitzvot achieve this purpose? So here we come to an idea that completely reverses everything upon which we have based our understanding of meditation up to this point. Okay? For what we've understood is that meditation has to start with the mind, which then influences the heart, which then ultimately leads us to behave or to act in a particular way. That's what we've been saying all the time. That's where we started. That's what we learned in the previous sessions. But what if it could work the other way around as well? What if we could start with actions? And actions then would work upwards, backwards, to affect our thinking, instead of our thinking being the ones that would affect our actions. What happens if you reverse the whole process and start with actions rather than with mind? Look at the next reference, text number 7 on page 191. This is taken from the Sefer HaChinuch, where all of the 613 commandments are laid out one after the other and are explained to the best of our ability. And the author says, "And now, my child, I will enlighten you to appreciate the Torah and its precepts. You are influenced by your actions, by your behavior, and your feelings and your thoughts actually constantly follow your actions, whether for the positive or the negative. Your actions have the power to overcome the negative inclination within you, since the attitudes of your heart are going to be influenced by your behaviors. That is the inversion that we come to in this lesson tonight. Because we are accustomed to thinking that our feelings and our attitudes and our emotions are coming from our thinking, and that it's our thinking which is going to define how we're going to act. And that's how we operate by default. But here we're suggesting that it works the other way around as well, that the way we act, even if we're not fully aware of the meaning and the purpose of the act, can actually affect our internal, emotional, and cognitive processing. Now, this sounds very abstract, but actually we'll discover that we know this. We all know this. There is a little exercise which we can do if you want for fun on page 191, exercise 6.3. Slouch your shoulders and frown for 10 seconds and ask yourself, how do you feel? Stand tall and straight with a wide smile and open arms wide for 10 seconds. How do you feel? I'm feeling great. In a very widely watched TED talk by a certain Dr. Amy Cuddy, who spoke about body language and presented the idea called power posing. Power posing. And he or she, I don't know whether it's a man or woman, Amy, offered some research that suggested that by forcing ourselves to have a positive body language, we actually bring that positivity inward. By presenting a confident body posture, you shift your mindset and you feel more confident. So what has happened? Your behavior has affected your mood, not your mood influencing your behavior. It's worked backwards. So if postures can impact on our mood and our attitude, then actual behaviors, actual behavioral practices can certainly do that, and possibly even with a more lasting effect. We are instructed to act in a certain way in order to develop new feelings and attitudes to direct us towards proper perspectives. That's what we learned from Nachmanides and from Maimonides. So if you follow this thinking now, mitzvot are actually meditations, because they are actions that focus our intention, shape our thoughts, and mold our thinking patterns, form our perspectives, and develop our character. And it all comes through the actions. The actions work backwards into us and change us as a result of acting. Well, it all depends on what mitzvot you're going to perform. You're performing. You're absolutely right, Alan. And that's exactly what we're going to look at to give some examples. So if you're looking to work on your character or to deepen your faith and your appreciation for spirituality, there are two ways in which you can do it. The first is you can pause to think and to meditate with your mind, which, as we've seen in all the previous sessions, is pretty challenging and is limited to how well you can focus and for how long you can focus and how much you can understand the ideas, which were big ideas and hard ideas. Or the other way is you can practice the mitzvot, which have a meditative effect, and cultivate the spiritual values and perspectives that you are trying to reach from the other form of meditation. So you've got two tools in your toolbox now. You can use them both. So a person comes to his rabbi and says, Rabbi, I don't practice Judaism because I don't believe in God. And the rabbi says to him, no, 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 it's the opposite way around. You don't believe in God because you don't practice Judaism. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But that's exactly what we're saying here. The behavioral benefits of a mitzvah occurs, by the way, even if you don't think much about it and you aren't even aware of it, because behavior impacts upon you unconsciously. Let me just pause over here. This is not in my notes and not in the JLI course, but it is pertinent. Those Russian soldiers in Bucha and those other places who behaved in that way, what does that do to their characters? What kind of people does that turn them into as a result of performing those actions? It influences their whole thinking. Their actions that they had to perform or that they chose to perform changes them as human beings for the worse. And conversely, actions which are done for the good change us for the better. So the action will have an impact upon you whether you're thinking about it or not. But once again, if you are aware, if you have kavanah, and you understand the motive behind this mitzvah and perform it with a specific intent to gain what is there in this mitzvah for you, the impact is going to be much greater. Because once again, kavanah changes the name of the game. And this, by the way, then shifts our entire attitude towards Jewish rituals and practices, because we don't normally think of performing a mitzvah as a meditative opportunity. Now, by the way, it's just important to remind us again that this isn't the sole purpose of mitzvot. Because if it were, you could argue, well, you know, I can reach this in other ways. You know, I don't have to do these actions to reach these. I've got my own ways of doing it. The essence of a mitzvah is that they are divine directive, and we do it because it is a divine directive. But meditative qualities and the improvement of the human being is one of the benefits that arises out of doing the mitzvah as well. That's text number 8 on page 192. The main focus within Judaism is action, which entails practically fulfilling the mitzvot. At the same time, each Torah-based action has an effect on the person's character. Learning Torah and fulfilling mitzvot refine the mind and emotions, as repeatedly emphasized in the works of Maimonides, who served as a guide for the perplexed of his generation and continues to serve as a guide for the truth seekers in all subsequent eras. So just as standard meditation models channel ideas and emotions by focusing the mind in certain ways with specific mindful techniques, mitzvot meditations channel these ideas by focusing the body through specific behavioral techniques. And what we're saying again and again tonight is that physical action, like the mind, both physical action and the mind can produce inner attitudes. So let's look at some examples now. And just remember that the meditative effect of the mitzvah happens whether you're aware of it or not, but being aware of it is going to amplify the effect and help you approach the mitzvah with the proper attitude. So the first mitzvah we're going to look at tonight is charity, tzedakah. And of course, the purpose and the value of tzedakah is pretty simple. The poor person receives much needed help, full stop. It doesn't seem that it needs much of a meditative purpose. Yeah? You're doing something good. But just take a look at this text once again from the Sefer HaChinuch. In text number 9 on page 194. So the root of the mitzvah to lend to the poor is that God desired that his creatures become accustomed and train themselves in the characteristics of kindness and mercy, for these are praiseworthy characteristics. And through training their bodies to act according to positive traits, they will be worthy of receiving goodness. For as we have explained, goodness and blessing fall exclusively on the good. If it were not for this benefit, God could provide the poor with their needs without us. Rather, out of sheer kindness, the blessed God made us his messengers so that we can become meritorious through the process. In other words, God could quite easily have designed his universe, his world, in which everyone has their needs and everyone is taken care of, and there wouldn't be any need for charity, quite simply. But he created the process of the rich and the poor because he wanted the giver of the charity to benefit as much as the recipients benefit, but in a different way. The recipient benefits with money, or with clothing, or with food. But the giver benefits in growing the giving gene inside of him or her. That's what happens with constant charity. The more you give, the more you become a giver. You see, the actions are changing your attitudes. That's why I said we know this intuitively. Sounded like big ideas, but actually, when you strip it down, that's exactly the way it works. Giving charity makes you a giver, a kinder, a more sensitive human being. And giving charity with a mindfulness of the connection with God, which is the general meditation present in every mitzvah, and add to that the specific kavanah in this mitzvah to refine our sensitivity and kindness, that makes the whole act more meaningful, and it just explodes the act into something which is much bigger. And the same principle is going to apply to the other examples that we're going to look at. So now let's look at how this works with the mitzvah of honoring your parents, kibud aveim, because that also appears to be, at first glance, just an intuitively positive thing. And nevertheless, here too, there is a beneficial meditation to develop. And that's going to be text number 10 on page 195. The root of the commandment for an individual to honor their father and mother is that it is fitting for a person to acknowledge and return kindness to those who provided kindness and to avoid becoming a selfish ingrate, an evil and repulsive attribute in the eyes of God and mortals alike. The mitzvah is designed to spur us to contemplate that our parents are the material cause of our existence in this world. It is therefore truly fitting to honor them in every way and to provide them with every benefit that is within our ability, for they brought us into the world and also toiled on our behalf in numerous ways when we were young. So again over here, by showing the honor to your parents, we are ingraining and we're developing within us and in our psyche the whole concept of hakarat hatov, gratitude. The more we do it, the more we feel it. The meditative quality, this meditative quality, by the way, in this mitzvah, will spill over to many, many other areas of our lives as well. Once you've learned gratitude, you're going to apply it in other places as well. So the mitzvah of kibud aveim is going to help us to become a more grateful human being. Shabbat. So everybody knows about Shabbat. And we probably know the reason for Shabbat as well. God created the world in 6 days, he rested on the seventh, so the seventh day is Shabbat. But hang on a second. Beyond the ritual that simply mimics the story of creation, Shabbat is also going to be a meditation. That's our text, number 11, on page 196. The root of this commandment to abstain from work on Shabbat is that we should free ourselves from our occupation to honor the day of Shabbat, thereby, and here comes the meditation, instilling within ourselves belief in God's creation of the universe. For this belief is the cord to which every foundation of our religion is attached. Belief in God as the creator of the universe is the meditation that comes with Shabbat. So by observing Shabbat and honoring Shabbat, we develop once again a stronger faith in creation. We imprint this faith in our minds. We strengthen our commitment to Judaism in general. The next meditation shown over here is on a tefillin meditation, and I'm going to skip that because I only want to focus on the mitzvot that apply to both men and women. But the men among you can take a look at that in your own time. So let's come to finally to the mitzvah of mezuzah. Placing a mezuzah on your door is more than just a symbol of Jewish pride or of divine protection. Once again, our text, number 13 on page 197, shows us where the meditation lies in this mitzvah. We must be careful to observe the mitzvah of mezuzah, for it is an obligation that is constantly incumbent upon everyone. Through observing this precept, whenever we enter or leave our homes, we encounter the symbol of God's unity and we recall our love for him. This activity shakes us awake from our spiritual slumber, our obsession with material vanities, so that we recognize that nothing we gain lasts forever except knowledge of the creator of the universe. And this will spur us to regain proper mindful awareness and make upright decisions. So you see, when you see the mezuzah hanging on your door, every time you enter or you exit your home, you're constantly reminded when you are you're crossing a threshold from the private to the public domain, from a private space out into the world, or from the outside world back into the privacy of your home. And that crossover is really important because you can't be one person in one place and another person in another place. You can't be all sweetness and light at work and an absolute horror at home, or even the other way around. This idea that God is present in all the spaces, back and forth, is the one that we're reminded of every time we cross a threshold. And the mezuzah is on the door and we see it. So this inculcates in us that he is the true existence of the world in all places, public and private, across all of the dividing thresholds of our lives. And therefore it is a mitzvah that helps us to develop a mindful awareness of God's presence in your home, in your life, and in the world, and that he is with us in all the different spaces of our lives. So that's it, good people. In conclusion, what we have sought to do in tonight's session is to redefine our approach to the practical observance of mitzvot, understand why there are so many mitzvot, why Judaism is so action-orientated, why there's so much action, and to gain an understanding of the meditative qualities and opportunities that are buried in every practical observance and the way in which it changes us from inside. Mitzvot are the touch points, the triggers that give us constant access throughout the day to the meditations that Judaism teaches, both by investing in meditative awareness into the mitzvot and in general, and by recognizing the active meditation element of that specific mitzvah. So instead of meditation being reserved, and I think this is really a big finale over here to this course. And possibly one of the fundamental differences between our entire concept of meditation within Judaism to other forms of meditation in the world. Instead of meditation being something that is reserved for the quiet moments when you set yourself aside, because they are, after all, fairly infrequent, times when you have to put yourself into another space to meditate, they're hugely beneficial in our busy worlds, yes. And I don't want to suggest for a moment that they shouldn't be done and that they're not important. But those opportunities are hard if you're not a meditator, if meditation is not your big thing, if you're a busy person and you're active in the world, and you lose all of those opportunities for the hitbonanut that we've been talking about. So therefore, Judaism offers us another pathway in the kavanah meditations, which come with mundane actions that we discussed last week: eating, sleeping, working, and the special meditations that come with every mitzvah action that we perform in the world, of which there are many, many, many. And therefore, it is a constant. It is an invitation to us to be there all the time, not just in those few moments that we take time out to sit and to meditate. And that, I think, is the revolutionary concept of meditation that exists within Judaism. The ones that we have looked at specifically in the last two lessons. As fascinating and as enlightening as all those other hitbonanut meditations were, these are the practical ones. These are the touchstones of our lives. These are the ones that we can access on a daily basis. And that is why there's so many mitzvot to observe in our daily lives. And that is why Judaism is so action-orientated. Because those actions are meditative opportunities and they change us as human beings. So I guess the next time any of us go off to do a mitzvah, I guess we should just pause for a moment, especially if it has a blessing that precedes it, and just stop to consider what this act is about and reflect on the spiritual connection that it provides in its general terms, and then reflect on the meditative purpose of this specific mitzvah, or try to understand it and how it's changing you, what its purpose is for you, and allow yourself to be moved by the active meditation of that mitzvah. And then suddenly mitzvot will change from being just matter of ritual that you have to go through into something that is truly and genuinely life-enhancing, something that makes your day special. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case. Here is a summary slide, after which we're going to look at the summary video, after which we are going to show you for the first time a trailer of our next JLI course. Dates still to be set. Here we go. Sorry, wrong one. Wrong one. Share screen. Oops, there we are. That's the one we missed out.
Lesson 6, Mind and Matter. The influences of meditation on practice and of practice on meditation. 1. Although Judaism emphasizes action over all else, the active performance of the mitzvot have a meditative quality too. 2. Mitzvot, as acts of service to God, bridge the divide between mortal mankind and the infinite God, and mitzvot serve to establish a relationship with God. 3. This meditative intent that motivates mitzvah performance is what makes them meaningful. 4. Mitzvot also personally benefit the person performing them. 5. Our actions and behaviors shape our mindsets and attitudes. 6. Each mitzvah serves as a meditative function to shape our moral and spiritual perspectives and to develop positive attitudes.
Beyond the Big Ten, the Torah has 603 more commandments. Beyond religious practice, like Passover and Yom Kippur, much of Jewish law is surprisingly devoted to civil life, like commerce, neighbors, and damages. But every society establishes civil laws. So what makes these laws uniquely Jewish? A common goal to all civil systems is to create a safe and civil society. However, these civil laws are designed to create something else, something that can only be identified by pinpointing the remarkable Jewish values on which Jewish law is based. Something, when discovered, revolutionizes your approach to everyday life. Join us for Beyond Right and discover the values that shape Judaism's civil code.
Yes, available in 400 locations around the world and in South Hampstead as well.
Can I say something?
Please do, Ruth.
I was going to say last week's shiur, which I watched the recording of, I thought the concepts were so beautiful and beautifully expressed, and it made me think that in previous courses we've talked about God wanting us to make the world a better place by making it a space where he can be present. And this is really what the mitzvot are all about. If one does every action, I mean, Judaism is about, as you say, the actions. And if we do everything that we do as well as we can and thoughtfully, and then it elevates every action and everybody benefits, you know. It's just, it gives it a spiritual quality, which is wonderful, wonderful, really lovely. Thank you.
Yes. So there's one session missing from the recordings, and I will go back and record them. I think it was our first session sitting around the table over here.
Yeah, the fourth
and
one.
I forgot to press the record button. So but you know, it's amazing, because I don't know how it is for you sitting on on Zoom, but it does make a difference sitting around a table talking to people.
Yeah.
Because you just feel a bit more animated. You know, it's when you speak to speak to the screen, and very often when I'm speaking and I have text in front of me on the screen, I'm part of the screen, and but I just don't see everyone, so you don't actually get the sense of feedback, of reaction. Over here, I get instant reaction because I see their eyes closing, and then I know that I have to start shouting a bit louder, you know. But you at home, you can close your eyes and have a good schloff and things like that, and I'll never know the difference.
If it wasn't for COVID, I would be there, but I just can't.